if you look at the history of Hindi, it emerged as a language of anti-colonialism. Like during the British Raj, Hindi was not one language. It was like a big, large north region of North India where there was no lingua franca. People were speaking their own languages, their own apni zuban. So Hindi was kind of codified by the journalists, the editors, the school teachers, and the academicians. Like it is probably the only language where prose happens before poetry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Afterword Voices in Translation podcast. This podcast celebrates the art of literary translation, exploring its joys and challenges while highlighting the often invisible work of translators across India and the world. It celebrates literary translators, places their craft firmly in the spotlight. I'm your host, Mohini Gupta, and I'm really excited to bring to you very exciting journeys in translation across languages with every new episode. Today, we're joined by editors of a newly published volume of contemporary Hindi poetry called Perennial, published by Red River. The editors Tuhin Bhowal and Sourav Roy are here with us for a conversation, and we'll be going into it very soon. This collection traces the very checkered history of the Hindi language, like a perennial river, I think, which flows through various political and literary movements over the years. It has a really brilliant introduction by Sourav Roy and some excellent translations by both Tuhin and Sourav. And I think it's an extremely rich collection. So I'm really excited to be able to feature it and talk about it here. Just by way of introduction, Saurav Roy is a bilingual writer, poet, journalist, and translator. He currently works as a Hindi teacher at Head Start Educational Academy in Bengaluru. With multiple books to his credit, his debut poetry collection, Kal Baisakhi, was published by Vani Prakashan in 2022, and his second poetry collection is forthcoming. Tuhin Bhowal is a writer, translator, and editor working between three languages, Hindi, Bengali, and English. He was the recipient of the Dipankar Khivani Memorial Poetry Prize in 2022, and his poems and translations appear or are forthcoming in New Verse Review, Oxford Anthology of Translation, Ballast Journal, Redivider, and elsewhere. So thank you so much, Tuhin and Saurabh, for being here and making time to join us for this conversation. So I'm just going to dive straight into it. I'm going to first just invite you both to talk about your journey with language and poetry. So if you could both tell us your sort of first engagement with either Hindi writing or poetry, and also with translation, what drew you to literary translation in this way? So just sort of talk about that journey, and maybe I'll invite Saurabh to begin, and then I'll invite Tuhin to share his journey as well. So, Saurav, over to you.
Thank you for inviting us, Mohini. My journey as a poet, not just as a poet, but as somebody who writes and scribbles, started very early. When I was in second grade, I was writing and just trying to parody the news that would be read out in the assembly or the popular songs that I would hear. I had a neural problem, and the doctor had asked me to do a lot of journaling, and I was prohibited from watching TV. So writing helped during that stage, but it was mostly for fun. Also to impress the girls in the locality, all those like things that kids do, right? So, and my school magazine would publish some of my poems, and all of those things went on. And I slowly started exploring a little bit more. Uh, then I went to a boarding school where it was much more structured. I had some really good teachers who guided me, who opened my mind to all that I could read and stuff. So by the time I was passing out from college, I had some of my like self-published books published, and I had written a lot basically, but much of it was just garbage, if you ask me. By 2012, I guess it was much more serious. I got in contact with Sudhir Ranjan Singh, who became my mentor and a phenomenal poet himself. And over the years, people like Arun Kamal, Rajesh Joshi, they also guided the journey a lot. So the reading and writing, everything got deeper. Around 2014, when I was not able to write for a while, I dived into translation. I was pretty impressed by a play by Howard Zinn, Marx in Soho, which I translated into Hindi. I soon translated other plays by Howard Zinn into Hindi, which eventually came out in the form of a book. And I was translating a lot of poetry during that time. Some of Japanese haiku that I translated also became a book. But translating into English because I was not very confident about my English. I consider myself a guy of Hindi language. But I was working as a journalist, writing in English. I had been blogging for a very long time. So Anamika, she was working on a Indian literature journal project where where she was bringing a lot of Indian Hindi poetry translated into English for the magazine, a special guest edition that she was editing. So she asked me to translate a few poems, and I did made that attempt, and she liked them and she published them. That gave me some confidence. And then Perennial happened. So it was like a leap of faith for me, whether I'll be able to pull this off or not. Thanks to Tuhin, who is a much accomplished Hindi English poet and a translator, who helped me also become a better translator over the years. So yeah, this is how Perennial happened. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you for being candid also about all of your the beginning of your poetry journey. But that's great to know. And Tuhin, what about you? Where did it start for you?
Hi, Mohini. I should really thank you because even on the podcast that you're doing, it has a long list of illustrious names when it comes to literary translators, right? So I was a little overwhelmed to join today. Whether do I have anything, to speak at all? But so thanks a lot. For me, if you ask me, it's quite opposite. If Because Saurav is here and I'm here, it's quite opposite. First of all, in the sense when it started, or literature or reading seriously, not reading for pleasure, but actually trying to read good literature. It started very late. Probably I moved to Bangalore in 2017. I think it was somewhere in the middle of 2018 that I met Saurabh first. At that point of time, 2017 is the year where I graduated from college. I was an electronics and computer science graduate. Those couple of years, the last couple of years from engineering college, there was little. I was facing a little bit of personal turmoil in terms of mental health, other such issues. So it was 2018 that I was searching something more than the daily scheme of things, surviving in a city like Bangalore. So I think at that point of time, reading or the ideas of trying to write, or what it means when you do these things, right? What are the effects that the body goes through in terms of movement as such when we read a good poem or we try to write something. Those sort of questions are started, uh, peeping into my psyche. I think at that time I had always been sort of a bookwormish, scholarly sort of a person, but then I was sure that something performative is not I'm looking, to find something for the stage, or something like a slam sort of a culture, which was very popular then, even more so than now, I guess, in a city like Bangalore before the pandemic happened. So I was looking for avenues where people would be serious about literature for the written page, right? And that is a phase in life where I met sort of finally. I looked up some of the events which were happening around Bangalore, and he was doing some of these workshops where, for the first time, I actually found someone or a group of people who were actually reading serious sort of literature seriously. Um, so I think it was that point of time, 2018, 2019, and then immediately when I started to read, so my first, I'm a Bengali, and then I was brought up in the northeastern part of India, Shillong, where I was obviously brought up with the English speaking, uh, heavily dominated English speaking society. Plus, I was also learning Khasi, the tribe language of Meghalaya. So in terms of languages, I was always inherently interested, not just reading or writing in English. So I think those were the things at that point of time. And suddenly, because in a lot of many of these workshops that Saurav was teaching, he was not just focusing on English or only Hindi. It was both. It was interesting to see, what is the kind of effect you have when you read something in Hindi and try to do it in English, or read something in Bangla and try to do it in English, right? I think that was the beginning of sort of journey in terms when it comes to literature. But then Perennial happened, I think, after 1 or 2 years when we were started to be friends with someone like Dibujyoti, who runs the whole publishing venture by himself, right? And he was the one who actually suggested us the idea that why don't you guys come together and do sort of this, because Dibujyoti, even now he has sort of this small vision where he wants to publish a few good pieces of books or collections or translations from almost all the prominent Indian languages, and even not the, you know, not the so prominent languages, right? So he has done multiple translations where it's not just Hindi, or it's not just Bangla, it's not just Malayali. There are translations from Punjabi and translations from the Telugu and all these sort of projects that he has been doing. So yeah, it was then I think we began working seriously at the advent of the pandemic. So it took us about 5 years, and we are both kind of quite lazy persons. So it it took us much more time than we initially uh, hoped for or expected to complete the project. Yeah,
I mean, the pandemic was hard, so there's also that. But yeah, you've
yeah.
answered a bit of my next question also. I was going to ask where the idea of Perennial came up, but really, like, it's such a mammoth task that you've both managed to achieve. And I forgot to show the book here. It's a collection that documents 40 poets, 26 translators, and 200 poems spanning across sort of decades. And it includes some of the most sort of iconic voices in Hindi poetry, whether it's Kumar Narayan, Kedarnath Singh, Manglesh Tabral, Anamika, Ashok Vajpayee. I mean, Gagan Gill. I can go on and on. But really, it is a really. I mean, I would find it a very intimidating task to do this. But you've both managed to do it really wonderfully. And I will get to a question around like how you selected the poets and translators and things like that. But I just want to first ask, like, what was the most interesting thing about working together on a collection like this? So if you can share some of those experiences of working together, putting this together, and yeah, just we know how it happened, but how did the process of putting this together really happen?
Working together with Tuhin or working together with the project of with so many people.
Yeah, I actually meant with Tuhin, but yeah, you can talk about your experiences with everyone that you brought in as well.
Okay, okay. So for me, the most interesting part of the work was mostly solitary, going through the poets and selecting the poems, because I initially had this bias that much of the great Hindi poetry has happened in the past, and right now not much great work is being written. Of course, with the exception of the stalwarts of the 19th century who continue to write into the 20th century, the names you just mentioned. Uh, but for much of the new poets, especially of my generation or a little senior than mine, I was very skeptical about their writings. But as I started reading, initial thought was to make it a small anthology, 20 poets. 15 were already in my head. These are the 15 poets. Select five more and get done with it within a year. But as the work went on and I kept on reading, I realized that there is so much more happening than I had anticipated or thought. So much of diversity, so much of new forms and themes and subjects being explored. So the river was widening, although it was it was not visibly moving very fast forward like it used to happen in the past, Kavita and all the progressive movements, but the river was widening. So that was like very humbling to read through so many poets and so then the task became mammoth, as you just mentioned. And so the most interesting thing was just reading, and it went on endlessly. Like even into the year of publishing, we were still reading and finding if we can add this poem by this poet and not have another poem by that poet. So all those that chaos was going on. Uh, Working with the team, I think Tuhin has done more of that task because he was working with the translators directly, and I was more or less like working with the poets and on the prose part of the book. So maybe Tuhin can answer that better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how we sort of initially when we started, we just simply started reading, right? So I was back home. Saurav was still in Bangalore, and we just used to have phone calls or emails, and just make huge lists of poems and poets. And to be honest, I was initially definitely when it comes to reading and the selection process, I have been working under guidance of Saurav, right? Because he knows the landscape so well, and he has been working at it for many number of years. After the first couple of years, 2 3 years, I think, where I sort of came into the picture, and even without saying it out loud, the way we divided our work is, I sort of went to a sort of more backstage sort of work in terms of I wanted to edit the poems, all right? Uh, and definitely, I wanted to work with as many translators as possible. I think finally, when the book was published, I joked with sort of that, why didn't we have like 40 translators for 40 poets, right? But then, yeah, that would have been nice. But then, initially, when we started working, I think we just had mine and me sort of, maybe a couple of other friends who were based out of Bangalore at that time, right? Who are still in the book, of course, as translators. But then it was not such a big project where we have more than 25 translators, right? So that was a challenge. That was exciting, talking to new people. And I mostly had these conversations virtually over messages or emails. I'm not a very good person when it comes to meeting like in person or being social. But then uh, the challenge where it was exciting and also frustrating at times was uh, the critique that I have been having of these translators is, uh, I mean, in my head, just because let's say a person knows a source language and a target language, right? Which we all naturally do, being bilinguals or trilinguals, right? It does not mean that you can just delve into literary translation without much thought into in your head. Okay, just because I know Bangla and I know English, I cannot just move around in the two. You have to bring a little bit more of effort and tenacity, right? So I think with some of the translations where I was feeling a little iffy that if I don't edit this much, uh, people were basically trying to translate line by line, which perhaps might work in a prose sort of setting where literary translators actually suggest that go sentence by sentence or line by line. But then a poem in itself is a complete sort of entity, right? You never know what the first line actually means by the time you're you finish the poem. So those threads needs to be connected, right? So I think there where I try to kind of see the poem as a whole, and then I was communicating with translators. See, this choice or these lines might work if these were the only lines, but you have these many lines following the poem, right? So it has to come together as a whole. So these were some of the challenges or some of the things that I was having quite not aggressive but quite animated discussions with translators, and it was always nice to disagree and go back. Many of the times, to be honest, I've gone with what the translators' choices were. For example, Adnan Kafil Darwesh's translation, which was done by Arib Ahmad, right? I am of a little bit of I have those choices in mind where I try to keep as many words from the target language itself, right? Trying to translate everything and see how it works. But Arib wanted to retain some of the words which were in Hindi or in Urdu, right? And finally, I think we have a lot of words in his translations where he has not translated, made the choice of not translating those words, right? So it was very different with different people, and some were like more much more receptive or much more open, and there were some email threads or some poets and translators where we had to work more to get it together, where all the parties sort of agree and don't kill each other. Yeah, so
Thank you. Animated is a nice and diplomatic term to use in this context. But no, thank you for sharing that.
I cannot be politically incorrect about everything, right? So
Yeah, thank you. I can only imagine how like huge this task was, but it's amazing that you were able to come to sort of, I mean, I guess you had to come to sort of some kind of consensus, but I would be interested in knowing, maybe as my next question to you, Tuhin, about these translation decisions that you talked about. And sometimes you have certain priorities in translation, like you said, and some other translators wouldn't. But were there things that you were trying to keep consistent? Like, is there some kind of a consistency that you feel, um, as editors, you've been able to sort of push the translators towards, or was that not a concern at all? I'm just trying to sort of understand some of the priorities that you had in translation, and how, as editors, you would sort of guide guide other translators, because everyone has very different styles, very different priorities. Of course, the poets themselves have different styles. So is that what was the priority, to bring out that sort of authenticity in the poet's voice? Were you trying to maintain some kind of a, yeah, some kind of a consistency in the translation decisions?
Yeah, so there are two main things that I can think about. One was in Indian languages, right? Let's talk about Hindi itself. Uh, when you There are many poems where when you because first of all in most of these poems and most of these poets actually make the choice of making the punctuation very sparse, right? You don't see a comma, you don't see a see a colon or a semicolon or a dash, whatever. So the rhythm of the language is such that you can actually go ahead and make out, okay, this is a stop here where it's the middle of the line, but then it kind of the clause or the sentence kind of comes to an end and something else starts. Or if there are multiple things separating, so the space just about works because you don't need a comma to actually. So what these kind of choices actually do is sometimes let's say a poem is a six line poem, right? So the second, the third, or the fourth line, when you read it in the Hindi, the second might have a meaning making connotation with the first line as well as the third line. Okay, and let's say the fourth line or the fifth line might have a connotation with the preceding line and the succeeding line, right? When you read. Uh, now, uh, Now, I have always felt, which is has to be the truth, that translation is where you close read the best, right? If you're not reading something with the intention of translating, you're not close reading as closely you could possibly, right? So when it came to the English versions, I wanted to kind of retain those ambiguities, which the Hindi had, right? How do you render a sort of poem where even in the English, with the necessary punctuations, because sometimes lack of punctuation does not really work in English, right? It just does not. Even on the page, it does not look as as finished. So these were some of the minor things which, because they were repeating with many poets, for example, Sudhir Ranjan Singh, for example, Mahesh Verma, right? I wanted to keep some of these elements. But also at the same time, because this was my first big editorial project, I am a complete newbie in that sense. I was also having conversations, if not with Saurav, with Dibyajyoti, that uh, I have to be aware and wary of not letting my preferences, hamper or sort of overpower what the translator wants to choose, right? So there, after a point of time, I think I had different versions of the poems where this was the final edited version, which the translator is okay, and this is what I would have my as my final version if I were the translator. But I was comparing how are these choices working or not working, right? And to be honest, diction is something which really gets affected with the kind of choices of words that you make, right? The very famous poem Keats's To Autumn, right? Now, if you change those mist and those twittering and those swallows and make it birds or making fluttering or make it fog instead of mist, it just does not sound like a Keats poem at all, right? So these were some of the things that I was working towards. Sometimes not even mentioning to translators, or it was just the edit suggestions that I used to send them. Okay, this is sort of edited version. Are you okay with this? So this sort of ambiguity where the lines have connotations with different lines was one major thing that I was working towards. But at the same time, I was very conscious about my translation choices and what I prefer and such like that. So yeah, that's a
Very
very specific thing, but yeah, that's what I can think about right now.
No, it's interesting. I guess it is the classic sort of domestication, foreignization dilemma in translation. So it is interesting how different people deal with it. And I guess in different contexts, you have to employ different strategies. But yeah, I was curious about how you were really thinking about that. Yeah, sort of behind the scenes during this collection. Saurav, I'll move on to you as well. And we were talking earlier, and I was saying that I really thought that your introduction was extremely rich and contextualized the collection very, very well. I really enjoyed reading it, and in particular because I am very, very interested academically in Hindi language politics and Hindi poetry and translation in particular. But language politics is sort of my academic field as well, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I thought that one of the really interesting things that came up for me and was a good reminder for me while reading your introduction was how the spirit of questioning the status quo has actually always been at the core of Hindi poetry. And I think we sometimes seem to forget that. And the fact that it has in the past acted as you say, as an antidote to petty politics in the country. But at the same time, it also acknowledges this hierarchy, so whether it's between Hindi and English or between Hindi and other languages, which have actually been victims of, Hindi's standardization also. So whether it's like other minoritized languages like Maithili, Santali, Garhwali, Bundelkhandi, like there's so many languages um, that have suffered at the hands of, the kind of hegemonizing of Hindi also. So there is this very complicated position of Hindi as this oppressor oppressed sort of a um, thing. And I was wondering if you can talk about just how you were thinking about the position of Hindi in the context of even like today's political sphere and these popular narratives around the language right now, and how do you feel that poetry has this potential to kind of subvert some of these narratives?
Hmm, hmm. So Hindi, in my mind, is very unique because if you look at the history of Hindi, it emerged as a language of anti-colonialism. Like during the British Raj, Hindi was not one language; it was like a big, large north region of North India where there was no lingua franca. People were speaking their own languages, their own apni zuban. ना? So Hindi was kind of codified by the journalists, the editors, the school teachers, and the academicians. Like it is probably the only language where prose happens before poetry. The poets are still writing in Braj and Awadhi or their local or their dialect in which their grandparents spoke. So the spirit of anti-feudalism, the spirit of anti-colonialism, the spirit of looking of empathy, all of this was embedded in the language to begin with, which kind of vanishes post-independence as India tries to look at its like national identity via language, and Hindi kind of becomes a very politicized language. And because of the like the Hinduization, the kind of nationalization of politics and the saffron movement in India primarily, Hindi becomes its weapon, the linguistic weapon. And poets have to respond to it. Now, how do they do that? They're writing in a language which is the language of the neo-colonizers. They're trying to colonize over other languages. Now, the more interesting statistics here is that except Urdu, every other language, official language of India, has been growing. It's not that Hindi is at odds with Tamil or Kannada or Bangla as much as it is at odds with Urdu or some of its own language where they share the same linguistic regions like Braj, Awadhi. You won't find people speaking in of my generation speaking in Braj or Awadhi. So that these languages are going to die with their grandparents is the reality. So Hindi has harmed its own sister languages more than it has harmed like the other large languages of India. Now, how do poets respond to this? One thing is going back to the spirit of Hindi, the Bhakti movement, the anti-colonial movement, and the other thing is trying to get more and more local with their own language, which is what poets do in the 21st century. If you see, the language of poetry has become diversified, lot more. Like Asad Zaidi or Devi Prasad Mishra or Adnan Kafil Darwesh, they naturally transition between Hindi and Urdu in their language. or somebody like Nirmala Putul or Jacinta Kerketa or Parvati Tirki. They are bringing in their own tribal language into Hindi. Parvati uses a lot of Kuduk words and its symbolisms in Hindi, metaphors, and very like without even having to explain it. So I think this is very important. The more poets are trying to speak in their own language, bring out poetry in their own language, the language that is their own, their parents' language, their region's language, this diversity will benefit Hindi. And of course, the challenges are much larger than anything that a poet or a few people can solve. Like it's a much larger problem we are dealing with.
Thank you. It's yeah, that's really well put. And I think that was one of my favorite things about this collection also, that, be it language politics or these sort of anti-Hindi sentiments in the country, communal violence, caste, and like apathy among people. There's so many very sensitive topics that are sort of touched in the collection. And I really feel that the collection is sort of not afraid to take a stand in that sense. I think I can see that there's been a deliberate effort for you to include voices who may otherwise not be mainstreamed, or may bring up things that people need to listen to. So I was wondering if that's also part of what went into the selection of poets and translators. Were you able to cover everything that you wanted to cover? Is there anything that you by chance like left out, or something that you wanted to include in the collection and couldn't include? Is there anything like that?
So, if you look at poetry only 25, 30 years ago, you will find that there are much fewer women writing, much fewer Dalit and Adivasi voices. Like 2025, if you look at the collections that came out, and 2005 and 2025, you'll see a huge spike in the marginalized voices. Now, even these voices are not marginalized anymore. Today, there are many more women poets, women academicians, and women readers even than men, the way I see it in Hindi. It was not so earlier. So when we are working on Perennial and we have defined the scope that it is the representative voices of 21st century, we also want to include the stalwarts, but we also want to include the new voices. So if you see, since the poets are arranged by their date of birth, you'll see that as you go deeper into the book, the more marginalized voices show up. But yes, this was the challenge, to maintain the balance. Where do we draw the line? A lot of choices were made deliberately and even political. Like, for example, if we have two poets to choose from, one is a Dalit and other is a Savarna, we would probably go with the Dalit poet just because we have chosen Savarna poets from the previous generation. So these were political choices, and we take complete responsibility for the choices we have made. Now you see, every anthology is will carry the biases of their editors, and but we have to define the scope. I mean, Divyajyoti had to stop us from making the book bigger. I can tell you 10 more poets whom we could have just included in the anthology, but then the project would become indefinite. Where do we stop? So our publisher had to stop us. And yeah, a lot of these choices were political, and not just political, but trying to bring in like a more diverse set of voices to show newness and to show how the landscape is changing. That was very important for us to show. Yeah.
That's amazing. Tuhin, do you want to come in on this as well and share your thoughts on this?
I mean, yeah, I mean, these are rounds of discussion that we were having with Dipajoti, and that's the kind of publisher and translator himself he is. Uh, so while there was, as sort of said, there had to be a line drawn in terms of the quality of the selections that go into, right? But then we have tried to be as uh, 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 representative as possible with the scope. I think initially the inception of the project, what Saurav and I discussed, was 21 poets for 21st century. That was the idea. Well, it seemed peppy enough. I think sort of realized that there are more number of poets that needs to be included. I think even before about 6 to 8 months, I think this was end of 2024. I think we had finally uh, come down to, I think, what, 37 poets. And then again sort of went into, at that time I completely gave up on reading because I was editing these poems every day almost as a daily routine. Then we again included three more poets, and that is how it finally came to 40, I think. I think if we have included more poems or poets, Divijyoti would have taken a flight to Bangalore and, like, uh, I mean, hunt us down or something like that. He was frustrated. So we had to end the process. And as it is, I mean, both of us are quite political. I mean, overtly and openly when it comes to our views, or not just about writing or literature, but what we think about and what our political stance is, especially in the current sort of political regime and times. So yeah, those decisions were also the whole political sort of aspect is very apparent and vibrant in Perennial. It was not something that we wanted to shy away from.
Yeah, I think that was it really stood out about the collection. So that's brilliant. Now that we've talked so much about the translators and poets that you chose and all the translations, I do want our listeners to hear a bit of the poems that exist in this anthology. So maybe I can invite you both to read something that you select from the collection. It could be your favorite poet, your favorite poem, your favorite translation. It could be your own translation. Absolutely up to you what you'd like to read out, but it'll be great to do some readings and get a sense of what's in the collection here. Saurav, would you like to start?
Okay, sure. This is a poem by Manoj Kumar Jha. The Hindi poem is called Niba, and the English title is Redemption. This body has been the only achievement so far. After the corn harvest, the scarecrow stood as the central pillar of the house when the walls sank during that blind flood. When my 1.5-year-old daughter was shivering on a late winter midnight, this body had become a cot and an ear cap. The one sitting beside the woman, suffering from the pain of cramps, wasn't this bewildered body, but a girlfriend feeding milk to the newborn by the lick of her fingers. When the policeman thrashed on the platform of the country's capital, rolling his eyes over the beard, what was this body then, Afghani or Bihari? For this was a tree of night jasmines, while waving a black flag at that murderer. Not even as much as a sugar in an ant's mouth. I am afraid of its forthcoming future. The crops were supposed to last as long as leaves are being gathered, being burned, and melted as memories return that there are countless ways to redeem a body.
Very powerful. And that was, of course, translated by you, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had completed this poem. Yeah. Tuhin, do you want to read something?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I and Saurav have promoted a lot about Perennial and the other translators. So I think even I'm going to read my own translation. So this, yeah. So this is the first poem in the book by Farid Khan. It's a small poem. The title is Tiger. I'm hopeful that to save its own species, the tiger will become a poet. The way dinosaurs became lizards, and the poet occasionally a tiger. It is the claw that brings forth the poet and the tiger. Both leave their marks. Both are killed.
Brilliant. Both very, very powerful poems and excellent translations also. Congratulations. And thank you so much for reading this out. Um, since the collection has come out, has there been, um, some reaction that has surprised you or made you happy, made you smile? I'm just like curious about the reader reactions that you've received after the collection because, of course, there are many Hindi poetry collections, but I think there's something different that you do with this collection. So yeah, I'm just curious about what readers have said after reading this.
I have been hearing mostly good about the book. And the response has been surprisingly good. You included, Mohini. The article you wrote on Afterword was very, very inspiring. The other media journals have also covered the collection, especially a lot of social media posts that keep showing up even today by the translators, their friends, poets, readers. So because the book itself is a collective work of 70 plus people. So even if everyone promotes it once, like we have a lot of mileage that way. But that actually hasn't happened. Not everybody is talking about the book, the people who are part of the book, but a lot of people who are not a part of the book have been very vocal about it. So it's very interesting actually how, like, from word of mouth promotion and people having read the book are talking about it. So it's been very overwhelming in that sense. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Tuhin, is there anything that you wanted to share about this?
I mean, frankly, I'm a little disappointed because there has not been any controversy. We have been joking around, me and Saurav. There should be some controversy, yeah. It'll help the sales of Red River. But I think till now there's not been any sort of such sort of news. Um, so yeah, and I've been getting like good reviews on Saurav's introduction as well. There have been people randomly on Twitter, because I'm only active on Twitter. Is that they picked the book as just a collection of poems, and when they found out there's an introduction, it actually it has actually kind of encouraged people to get individual some of the individual collections of the poets in Hindi, and the book also contains sort of a bibliography where you can go and look up the book that we selected the poems from. So yeah, and I think after a point, the why I was passionate I mean, to complete this project was, for example, right now I'm going through a bit of discovery or disillusionment phase where I'm turning towards Bangla poetry, right? Uh, very seriously, and reading and trying to maybe even translate from the next year onwards. And the first thing that a reader who is completely amateur as such in terms of exploring the literature scene is anthologies are really important, right? Imagine all those Norton anthologies. While the representation in those sort of penguins and the Nortons is mostly the old white man, but then those poets are important, right? As an English poet, I cannot not choose to read the Shakespeares and the Miltons and the Popes, right? So I think by the time the project was finishing, I had this vision or this image in mind that someone who was starting off like I did a few years back, where I did not know what are these poets, who are these writers. I mean, if someone just picks up a book, this might just be a good sort of a new, updated sort of an entry point where So I think if that is being done, even for a very handful number of readers, I think the objective is kind of met.
No, I think that's amazing. And I think I said this in my review also. It's one of those collections that you just want to keep next to you all the time and keep returning to, because really it's so comprehensive. And like you said, Tuhin, there's a canon in a language, and I think a collection like this really rethinks and recreates that canon also, which is really incredible. And Saurabh was talking about really consciously looking for new voices and um, getting over this prejudice that good poetry was only written earlier and is not being written now. I think that's something so important, and I think I've also had those thoughts before. But this collection really challenges a lot of prejudices, a lot of yeah, just long held beliefs about Hindi poetry. I mean, if there are any. But I think yeah, I think it does something really unique in that sense, and I really appreciated that about it. Yeah, just before we sort of wrap up the conversation, I was curious to know what you both are working on currently. What is keeping you busy at the moment? Is there something that you're planning to work on together? And yeah, just if you can tell us about your latest project. Saurav, maybe you can start first.
So I am an on and off translator, but translation keeps me sane. After Perennial, I went back to my own poems. Basically, I've been working on my new poetry collection for a while, which I was still working. Like So I went to my hometown during the Dashera vacations and ended up like writing a lot. After coming back, I have not been able to stop writing. Like it has been quite overwhelming. Like I've lost my appetite, sleep, everything for the past few months. I've just been writing. So I ended up editing a lot of poems from that collection and writing some new poems as well. But you cannot think and be a poet all the time. Like it's impossible. It's very frustrating because at the end of the day, I feel there is some amount of divinity involved with writing a poem. It does not work like a novel where you can just put in that amount of hard work and it happens. So I want to translate a lot more Indian English poets into Hindi. So that has been on my mind for a while. I've already translated Gopal Honnalgere and working on Arun Kolatkar. I'll keep translating, but translating into English is something I never thought I would do, but Perennial and some of the earlier projects helped me do that. But I want to go back to writing more and more in Hindi, translating English into Hindi. Yeah.
Amazing that it pushed you beyond your own comfort zone also, but you're sort of going back to that also now. Great. And Tuhin, what about you?
Um, uh, yeah, I generally work very hopelessly, with with no hope. But so I don't have a publisher or a agent yet. So all these projects are, most of the times they're in my head. But then when it comes to prose, I've been working a little more actively last couple of years translating prose, and this is I'm just about to finish a working draft of a short novella by Rajkamal Chaudhary under the Essays Fellowship, right? So that should be completed by end of December this year. And then I've also been working on a sample proposal of another novel, which is basically about a downtrodden Muslim society. So I've been working on that sample. So this is basically about prose, but then with poetry, there are a couple of projects. So one is editor and one is a translator. I think both will finally happen through Red River. Is I'm editing a new selection of poems by Hushang Merchant, which Red River will put out. Well, the scope of the project might not be as big as we had finally thought because Hoshang wants it to be published earlier than later. But then this will be probably the first volume in English where it will contain selections from each of his collections. Each of his collections individually published, chapbooks, basically more than 25 collections. So that will be quite a big volume of a selected volume. And then I'm trying to complete a little chapbook of translations from the Hindi into English by Sudhir Ranjan Singh, whom I've been working on and off last couple of years. So in the book also in Perennial also I've translated him. So these are some of the things, but I'm not sure if the project will be picked up or not. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are really exciting projects. Good luck with all of them. Before we end the episode, there's a new segment that I've started in this season. It's called the Translation Rapid Fire Round. And what this means is I'll ask you both three very, very easy but very quick questions, and you have to tell me what comes to your mind first. Okay, so now that we have two of you, let me go one by one. So, Saurav, maybe I can start with you, and
Sure.
then I'll ask the same questions to Duhin. Okay, so your first question is one Hindi word that you wish English had.
Apan,
Okay,
the inclusive we,
yeah, nice. Okay. Music or meaning, what to retain and translation.
music.
One book that you wish you had translated.
Uh, I can't think of anything. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. We'll move on to Tuhin, who now has had some time to hear the questions. So,
Oh, so I
Tuhin,
get the same questions, is it?
yes, you get the same questions.
Okay.
So, Tuhin, one Hindi word that you wish English had.
Mm, I like the hum of Hindi, but then the we in English does not, I mean, do it, right? Because hum people say it from different, I mean, there are people from Jharkhand and Bihar who use it for the singular, but hum is something I really like,
Nice, yeah.
rather than like hum, yeah, main or aap, yeah,
Mm.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay, great. Music or meaning, what to retain in translation?
So definitely music. Yeah.
I would expect no less from the editors of a poetry collection. One book that you wish you had translated.
So this can be like any language, any. I think I wish I knew German. I could have translated maybe Kafka or someone. Yeah. Maybe The Castle, a new translation of The Castle.
Why
But
not?
I can't.
Never say never. It might happen.
Yeah. I'm having a tough time with Bangla, so I'm definitely not going to German right now.
No, great. Thank you so much, both of you, for being sports about this and for such insightful and interesting conversation around the Hindi language, Hindi poetry, the collection Perennial. I'm really excited that it's out, and I'm really excited that I just have this with me that I can sort of go back to anytime. And I hope that we'll continue to stay in touch and keep talking about new and exciting projects that you're working on. Thank you so much again for being on the Afterword podcast. And yeah, looking forward to your new work as well.
Thanks, Mohini.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.